Hey programmers, what is going on? I'm the Savage Coder, and welcome to episode 38. Well, this one is a request from some subscribers to the channel, and I finally figured out, I think, a good way to explain everything, and that's kind of why it took a little longer. We're going to talk refresh tokens today. So the JWT token videos that I have already will go right along with this. And so if you haven't watched those yet, be sure to check out those before this, because they explain things pretty well, and without that background, you might not be able to follow along 100%. So if you need to check those out, you can check those out in the card above. Bing! So before we jump into code, let's talk about what a refresh token is and how it relates to the scenario. Well, as you know, we can get a JWT, we'll call that token the access token, and you provide your login and your password, and you get in return a token. And so we use that token to authenticate all of your calls after that. Well, the problem is if you expire that token, then you need to get a new token. And to get a new token, you would need the same thing you need in the beginning, which was your login and your password, or your email in our case is the login. So we'd need an email and a password. Well, how would you feel if you were on a website and you're in the middle of things and everything's going good and you're enjoying yourself, but then your token expires, and instead of clicking on the next thing you need to do on that application or site, it now bounces you back to the login page where it's asking you to log in again? That would piss people off. So especially when you're talking about sites like Facebook or any social media platform, the last thing you would want to do is to log them out and make them log back in to continue using the platform. So that's where the need for a refresh token kind of comes into play. The other reason is that if you make the expiration of your access token very far off in the distance, and it somehow falls into the hands of someone who should not have your token, those opportunities would come up more if your token had an expiration date, let's say, that was a year in the future. So the safer way to do things would be to expire your access token relatively quickly and then allow the user to get another access token. But we want to do that without providing a login and a password. So the way we can do that is we're going to create a refresh token at the same time that we create an access token. And we'll return both of those back to the user. The access token will make a nice short-lived token. And for our purposes here, we'll make that like 20 seconds so we can really see it expire and follow through with the refresh. And the idea being that we can send a refresh token in saying, hey, I'm me, I logged in and you gave me this refresh token, and only I have that. So even if someone stole my regular token, I'm not passing the refresh token back and forth. I might just have that in a cookie or in a local store. So when we need our token, a new access token, we can use this refresh token that we've stored, send it off into our authentication system, and what we'll do is we'll have to check and see, is the refresh token good? And is it expired? And if it's not expired, then reissue an access token. So to be the most secure, we would want to, when we use our refresh token, we would want to exchange that for a fresh token and a fresh refresh token. So we only use our refresh token one time. We get back our new token to use for authentication, but at the same time, we get a new refresh that we can use when we need to. And that way, we can set a long expiration on our refresh token and a short expiration on our access token so that we can keep that login fresh. The refresh token itself is just going to be, it's not a JWT token at all. It's just an encrypted bunch of garbage that we can use. And so we have to associate that refresh token with the user that's logged in. Because the refresh token doesn't have all of my credentials in it, making it something safer to store, we need a way to tie that refresh token back to, the actual user and their token. And we need to do that with a database of some kind. So you can get into a whole huge scenario here. When you start getting into refresh tokens, you're kind of on the verge of probably wanting something a little more secure and a little more robust. Maybe consider something like Okta or Auth 0 for those scenarios. They'll give you the, or maybe even the identity server if you want to run your own identity server. Those will give you so many options. You'll be able to revoke your tokens and do so many things that would probably be difficult to keep up with on your own. If you're going to do something that deals with people's money or, private information, your PII, you would definitely want to consider getting a good, SSL certificate and using some kind of an OAuth system who keeps up with the standards and keeps things patched and, that kind of thing. So enough said there. In this video, instead of using a database, we are just going to set up a static store. And so wherever you see the token store in the code today, just know that in real world scenario, you would replace that with either a SQL server or a NoSQL server, or any database is fine, as long as you're comfortable with it. But storing and retrieving and things like that, it can be done by anything. And I didn't want this video, it's already going to be a little long, so I didn't want to make it too long where now we have to define schema, stored procedure, table. That's not really the focus of this video. We want to talk about refresh tokens and how to use them. So we'll just I'll point it out as we go that here's where you'd want to replace this logic just with a call to a database. So let's check out refresh tokens and how they work. You're cloning this repo fresh for this episode from episode 38. You're going to have to set up a JWT signing key. And so we've talked about how to do that, but if you go on the GitHub, there's a repo you can pull down for a JWT signing key. All you've got to do is run that, and it will spit out a code, and you can use that code to run your API. And I'll quickly go over how to do that here, since it's been a little while since we messed with the C# stuff. All right, let's get to refresh tokens. So this is the code that I pulled down from the repo for Savage Cell API. It is the latest version. Like I said, before we can actually use this, we are going to right-click the project for the API and go to Manage User Secrets. And you can see that I have this crypto settings JWT signing key. You'll need to do this. This is not in the repo. And for the value here, you should probably spin up your own. You can use this one if you want to copy it off the screen. But I would, first off, let me bump that size up a little bit. First off, you can generate your own by going to the GitHub page. Let me put that up here. And in the Noble Cause Code repo, you will find one called Secret Keygen. So just pull down the Secret Keygen at github.com/Noble Cause Code/Secret Keygen, and just run this in Visual Studio or VS Code, and it'll open up a window, and the first thing in that window will be a code that you can use just for a signing key. Once you have that, you should be able to run this project, and we will test that now. There were build errors. Why were there build errors? Could not copy the file. Interesting. Let's try building again. What is that? I am not sure what that is, so I'm going to open the folder in File Explorer. And I'm going to delete my bin and OBJ folders if I can. And then let's try building this again. And now it worked, so let's try. I don't know what happened there.
Well, it's about time.
Sometimes Visual Studio gets a little wonky. So here is that API. So we're good here. All right, we'll be using Postman and stuff later, but for now, let's go into our project. And you'll see I have another Visual Studio open off to the side here, off screen, that I'm using for notes. So what I want to do is I want to go into this data folder, and I want to add something to store our refresh tokens.
Whoa.
And we're going to be injecting this into a service. So first, let's go ahead and right-click the data folder. We're going to add a class. I'm first going to make an interface, and we're going to call this iTokenStore. Let's bring this guy down so we have some more room here. All right, we have our iTokenStore, and then we're also going to create a class inside data. So we're going to add a class, you guessed it, called TokenStore. And then we will implement our iTokenStore interface from there. And so what our token store is going to do is it's going to store a token. So we need a token that we can use. So because this token that I'm representing here is really, it's just for use with our token store class, the actual token with the refresh token. I'm going to create this in the data folder. It kind of is like the data from a table. So maybe what we should do is let's go ahead and just keep it all in the data folder, because you might not actually need this class in the end. You might replace this with some entity framework or something like that. So I don't want it to live in the project. Again, everything I'm doing in this data folder today should be replaced with a database on your side, and you'll see more what I'm talking about as we go. So I'm just going to create something called a token inside the data folder. And the token is going to hold a few things. So first, it's going to hold a string, which is the email, and that's our login for Savage Cell. And so I need to be able to verify and find this token when you send me a refresh. So it'd be nice if I said, hey, tell me who you are and send me a refresh token, and I can verify both of those from what you send me to what's in this class. So this class will also have the access token, and it'll have a refresh token. And it needs one other piece of information, which is a date time, and we'll call that the refresh expiration date. And let me fix my E, and I'm going to do a Alt-Enter and bring in the using for system. So this is all we're going to need. This is what we're kind of, we'll use the email to look things up. We'll have our refresh token, and we can check when we issue a refresh token, we'll set an expiration for that refresh. And so if somebody tries to refresh and it's past the date, then we'll make them log in again, because eventually we're going to want you to verify who you are. So now let's look at our token store. And we're going to just kind of build out like what we need as far as like our database. So for me, I'm going to make a public dictionary, and it's going to hold a string and one of those tokens we just created. And we'll call this property token, and it's read only, so it only has a get. And let me alt enter and bring in system.collections.generic so that we can do that. And so this dictionary right here is our database. So if you create a new database, you would need a table that would hold the users, right, the email. And so this would be a table that had email and then all the other things like that token has. So this is kind of your table. And we'll look up things in our dictionary by the email, and that's what that string is. So, and then let's create a constructor, and in the constructor, we'll just say tokens is equal to a new dictionary of string and token. Nice and simple. Oh, that's why it didn't work. Token, not token store. Token store is the class. We're trying to set this variable to a new instance of this dictionary right here. And then, so now we've got so now we can just start storing stuff in this token store, right? Token store.token is, that actually should probably be tokens. Let's add an S to that. There. So now tokens is our database, or in your case, it could be a table. And so now we just need some methods. I want a public void. I want to be able to add a token to the database or to the token store, and it'll take in my email, which is a login, and a token. And we'll worry about what that does in a little bit. And then we'll do another one, a public void. We could do a public, we want to return a token, and we want to have a get token. And that's also going to take an email and a refresh token. And so what this is going to do is it's going to look up, it's going to look in this store and try and find this email, verify that the refresh token matches. And so we'll know that, Savage Coder at sharklasers.com sent me this refresh token. If I can find it, then I can return the token, right? Like, that's how we'll determine, by getting the token, we'll then validate it and make sure that everything is good, because this token that we're returning has the expiration date and things like that. So we can actually write this code now, even though we haven't really added. We can actually add things to it too. So I guess let's do it now. I was going to do it later, but no time like the present. So first thing we want to do when we add a token is see if it exists already. We don't want to add something that's already there. So we can say if tokens dot contains key, and the key is the email. So if you find a token with that key, then we just want to say that tokens of that key, that email, is equal to the token that's passed in, right? This token right here. So if we found the token, just replace the value. Otherwise, if you didn't find that key, then we just want to add one, right? So tokens.add, and we're going to give it the email and the token. And we'll just store it in there. And so this is basically your insert or your upsert for a database, right? If it exists in the database, then update the row. Otherwise, add a new row. And so that's what that would do. And now to find that token, that's pretty easy too. We can just say if tokens.contains key email, same like we did, can we find it? And if tokens of email, right? So actually look at the value dot refresh token is equal to the refresh token. And so let me move this out of the way a little bit here. So what we're saying here is go into the token store, find this email in there, right? Would mean we previously had added it. Or if you're in a database, you could say, select star from tokens where email equals this email. If you find it, look at the refresh token that's inside that token object, right? When we added it. When we sent this token in, it had a refresh token. So this person is saying, get me a token. Here's my email and here's my refresh. I just want to make sure, A, can I find that email? And does the refresh actually match what I already have in the database from when I added it? So as long as I have that, then I feel pretty safe saying return tokens of email. That's the token I want to return. And then if I didn't find it, I just want to return null, because then there is no token to return. I couldn't find it. And that's it. This class is done. So this is just like a stand-in for a database. Let's go ahead and register this class for dependency injection so we can use it in a service. So we'll just scroll down here past all of our stuff to these add singletons, and that's exactly what I want as a singleton. Once we create that class, I want the same instance all the time. And because this is an in-memory kind of a database that we're doing here, every time I start the project, it's going to be wiped out. So we'll have to register each time, and I'll show you how we can deal with that. So I'm just going to do a services.add singleton, and it's going to be an iToken store and token store. And that's all that takes. I'm going to do an alt enter to bring in noblecause.savagecell.api.data so that it knows what those two are. And that is all there is to that. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to go and set up, we already have our code in the startup here that verifies our access token, right? That's what this code here is doing. And we also have a service, the authentication service. It knows how to create a token in this request token async. And we'll take a little look at that because we got to modify this, because at the end, we are writing out our token and we're returning this token response with our token in it. Remember, we also want to put our refresh token in there. So we're going to have to add that property to this guy as well. So before we get to that, let's start at the controller level. That kind of makes sense to me. And below our call for token, I also want to do a post for our refresh token. I'm just going to copy this one because it's kind of close to what we need. It's still a post. The call, we're not going to call it API token. I'll call it API/refresh token with a capital T. We do want to allow anonymous for this because, remember, we're only calling refresh token because our access token expired. So if we don't put the allow anonymous here and we put the authorize attribute, it's not going to let a non-logged in user try to refresh their token, which they need to do. So we can't have the same name here with request token. So we're just going to make that refresh token. And it's not just a token request. We'll have to make a refresh token request. And we'll call that a refresh token request variable here. We don't have this yet, so but we'll have to create that. Okay, and in our refresh token, we are going to do a refresh token async. And we will pass in our refresh token request to our service. So this looks good now, right? As long as all of this works, it will return us a new token back with a refresh token. Let's go ahead and create this refresh token request. So if we go into our models API and add a class here, I'm going to paste that refresh token request in there. And this is just what you request when you want to refresh your token. What data are you passing? So we're going to pass email, and we're going to pass the refresh token. That's it. So that was easy. And so now we just have to create this refresh token async in our authentication service. So let's copy refresh token async, and I'm just going to jump to my authentication service request token async, which is going to kind of put me in my authentication service.cs. So I kind of want the same thing that I'm doing there. So I'm going to control D on that. And I think we want to do a refresh token async. It's going to take a refresh token request called refresh token request. Okay, and that looks like that. So now we just need to implement how to refresh our token, which is not as scary as it sounds. Lucky. So I'm going to hover this and implement the interface, or you can do an Alt-Enter there as well. And so that put somewhere in here, there it is, refresh token async. So we're going to take out this not implemented, because guess what? We're going to implement it.
Whatever.
All right, so we need to make this async. So the implement never puts the async in there, and I always forget. So let's do that first. So first thing we kind of want to do here is we want to validate the refresh token, right? Let's make sure that it is what we think it is and that it's not expired. So let's do that. Let's say like is valid is equal to, and we'll make a method called validate refresh token, and we'll pass it the refresh token request that is coming into this method right here. So we have to create this method, so I'm going to go ahead and Alt-Enter and generate that method. Now, it doesn't know what isValid is here because it's var, so it made the method return an object, but we know that we're going to return a bool. True or false, is it valid or is it not valid? So first thing we want to do is we want to grab that token from our database, or in our case, our token store. So in order to do that, we have to bring our token store in here through dependency injection. Lucky for us, we just finished registering it in the startup CS. So I'm just going to make a private read-only variable, and we're going to call that an iToken store. And we'll call it underscore token store. And so let me Alt-Enter and bring in my .data namespace, which it put up here. And now I can Alt-Enter on the variable name, and I can choose add parameter to the constructor. And so that added my token store here and my token store here, and now I can just use it. Boom. So let's get our token. Let's say our var, we'll call this our stored token. This is the one coming from our pseudo database. And we can say token store.get token. Oh, we don't have an interface for our token store. Notice it only says get hash code or get type. That tells me I forgot, after we implemented our token store, we forgot to go back and fill in the interface. So if I look at my iToken store, it's empty. And so I just need to go to my token store itself and take all the public things from it. Okay, so let's put our dictionary object in there. I'll copy that because that's a public property, and I will Alt-Enter and bring in the generics namespace. And then I also need from my token store my void add token. So we can copy that, put a semicolon at the end there. And the other method I have returns a token called get token. So I'll put that in there. And now my interface is good. So I can go back to my authentication service now, and when I hit dot on my token store interface, I can see all the things I need. In this case, get token is what I'm after, and I can get token by passing it. Might be hard for you to see the IntelliSense, but it's email and refresh token. So I can say refresh token request.email and refresh token request dot refresh token. Okay. And let's make that look a little nicer. Like that. So now we should have our stored token, so we can check that if stored token it does not equal null, then we can make our checks. We found the stored token, so let's do our checks. So if the stored token dot refresh expiration date is less than datetime.now, meaning if the date that when we created our refresh token, we gave it a date in the future. So if we're past that date now, then it's expired. It's old milk.
Ew.
Okay, so we'll just say return false, right? If today's date is greater than the date it expired, then validation is false. It failed. And then after that check, we can check for if the stored token dot refresh token come on, does not equal the refresh token request dot refresh token. That's a mouthful. So what we're saying here is somebody said, hey, validate this token request. It has an email and it has a refresh token. Based on both of those, I already know that my token store validated it. So I really don't have to do this check here. But in the case of a database, you might not be checking that at the data level. So you could do that here in a service, especially if this was some reused thing that might not follow the same path. Maybe it doesn't do exactly this everywhere. So you can always put this check here and you can return false in this case because the token that we have stored in our database doesn't match the one that's being passed in. Again, that already happens in here, so this is never going to happen in our scenario, but I wanted to just kind of cover that case. So as long as it's not expired and it matches, then we can return true. We are good to go. And if we were not able to find the token up here outside the if as a catch-all, we'll just return false in case everything goes wrong, right? And that's that. So now we can validate our token. So we've got our token, we validated it, we know that it's not expired at this point. So we can check our flag, we can say if is valid, is valid. So what we're going to do inside refresh token here is now that we know we're valid, what we basically want to do here is we want to get a user. And with that user, right, we can get a token access token, and we can get a refresh token. So the problem that we're going to run into here is getting this user. If we look at our method for getting our token, this request token async, if you notice the very first thing that it does is it takes this token request, our original one, which has our email and our password, and it uses that to look up a user object. And then from that user object that we got out of the database, from that we get the user ID from the database. We know the username and the email that we have in the database. But this time we're not getting a token request. We don't have a password. Remember, we're not prompting the user for a password, and we don't store a password in a way that we can reuse it, obviously for security reasons. So we need a new way of getting a user object from a refresh token or an email, right? Because we have both of those. So in our refresh token request, we have an email and a refresh token. So we need to be able to get a user from our database for that. That's going to be our challenge here. So let's go ahead and look at our services for the user service. And let's look at what we do right now to get a user. So here's our login with our token request. We actually pass it an email and we can get back a user. So we're able to look up a user by email, and then as long as we find the user, that's when we compare the password to the password. Well, if I have a refresh token and an email, I even with just the email, I can already get this user. And so I kind of need this line of code right here in order to make this thing work. So in addition to this login user async, which works fine, I need another method below this where I can just look it up without a password. I basically want this first line, but I don't want to do this part right here because I don't have a password. So let's create a new method here. Public async, and this is going to also return a user, and we'll call this get user from refresh token async. And we'll take in the two pieces of information we have, which is the email and the refresh token. Okay. And in here, we kind of want to do the same thing that we did up here. So let's grab the user. And so we're going to call the user repository. Our email is just in this variable here. So this gets replaced. So now I have a user. So I can do the same check that I did here, making sure that I actually have one. Right, so now I know I have a user, and I just want to make sure here that everything in the token store jives with this email and this refresh token, just as a extra security precaution here, because we're about to return a user by email and we have not looked at their password. So I'm just going to do a token store. Actually, we need to bring in the token store here as well. So let's do the same thing we did there with a read only token store. And this would be like your database context you'd be bringing in here. Token store. And I will alt enter and bring in my data, and then I will alt enter on the variable and add it to the constructor so that I can now use my token store. So I want to say here after my user, I want to say if the token store dot get token, and I want to pass it the email and the refresh token. And I want to say if this does not equal null, which means, get token is going to return the token with the refresh and the expiration. But really all I'm interested in is, hey, you sent me this information. Do I already know who you are? And so by looking in here, if I find something, it won't be null. I don't care what it is. I already know that it took these two pieces of information to look it up and validate it. So as long as you found it there, I feel safe now returning that user. And if anything didn't work in there at all, then I'm just going to return null. So now we've got a way to get user from refresh token. And we need to add that to the interface for this user service. So let's go into our user service, and we're just going to add that to our interface. Meanwhile, back in the authentication service. All right. So in our refresh token async now, we can get a user. So we should be able to call let's get our user. If our user is equal to await user service dot get user from refresh token async, and we are going to pass it our kind of hard to see here, but this guy that we're pulling in here, I want to do that dot email and the same thing dot, not email, refresh token. So let's make that somewhat readable. I got my font cranked up here, so I don't know if we're not going to get it all on screen. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to do that here for now, just so you can see it. Cool. And that goes, oops, semicolon. So now we have our user, so I can say if user is not null, right, does not equal null. Now we know we found something, and what I want to return here is let's look at our request token async. What I want to return here is this token, right, with a refresh token. So I kind of need, like, after this, like I did my version of this now, I need to create this stuff, the claims and the token and the expiration date of the token, and then like after this I need like to create my refresh token and stuff it inside this response. So I don't want to duplicate this code. So what we're going to do is we are going to create a method that does all of this for me and returns this token response. So I'm going to highlight everything from where we create our new list of claims down through the return. And once I have that selected, I'm going to hit Alt Enter. Whoa, that didn't work good. Alt Enter. There we go. And you can see that it pops up here, extract method, and that's what I want to do. I want to take all that code and turn it into a method call or a function. And so I'm gonna select this, and it says give your new method a name. Well, this is just create token, and hit we can hit apply, or I think we can hit escape. So I'll click apply there. And so now I've created this create token, and it does exactly what we think it should do here. Right, it creates the token and returns the token. So now in request token async, it returns a token. Well, I need to do the same thing in our refresh token async. So the idea is when we call to refresh a token, we grab the user. We validate the token, we grab the user, and if we found the user, we create a new token for that user. That create token will have the access token in it. And so we can look at what we did when things didn't go well in our request token. We just want to say, hey, if you create the user and you create the token, if anything goes wrong in any of those, or you can't find the user, just go ahead and throw an authentication exception. And so we'll do that after ours as well. So in here, if it's valid, we're good. If it's good, it returns. In the end, it's just going to drop through here, and we'll throw that. So the one scenario that we need to cover here is what if our refresh token is not valid? So we've called refresh. We said we're good, but maybe it expired. So we do kind of need an else case here before we just throw an exception. And so we would probably want to, so we'll probably in here want to do like, throw new security token expired exception, right? Something like that, and then handle that on the front. Okay, so we are good here. The only thing that we need now is this create token needs to do a few things. So we're able to, at this point, we're able to get access tokens. When we get an access token, what we want to do is we want to store things in our token store right there when we create the token. That way, when we want to refresh, we can look them up from the store and replace the stuff that's in the token store with the current token. And so we'll reset, the expiration date and stuff. So let's modify the code that we have for the actual token, and we'll add the refresh token into it. So looking at our create token class, all of this, or create token function, excuse me, all the claims are fine. All of the key and credentials are fine. The JWT signing token, the security token is fine, and the signing credentials and all that. So everything up to that point is fine. What we need to stick in here is we need to create a refresh token, and we need to add that token to the store. So I think what we can do is we can kind of get our token response. So maybe let's leave that there, and instead of just returning a new token response, let's just capture that in a variable. So we'll just say token response equals, and then at the very end, we'll just return that. So far, it doesn't do anything different than it did. We're just copying this guy in one of these objects into here. So the other thing we want to do in here is we want to add a refresh token, and we want that to equal something. We'll generate a refresh token. Right, that'll be a method that we create that returns a refresh token, which is just a string. And so we need to go into this token response and add a refresh token property so we have a place to store it. And so I'm just going to Control D and name that refresh token. Really simple. So now we just have to create this method. I'll do that with an Alt Enter and generate. Whoops. Looks like I messed things up. I'm going to Control Z here. And I think I know what happened. I have a semicolon there that I should not have because I'm inside the creation of this token response. So let me try that again. Alt Enter, generate method. That's better. Okay. And so it's just going to return a string into our refresh token. So assuming that we'll code this out to return some random string, we need to then take our new refresh token and our access token. And in here, we also have things like email and user ID and all that stuff, and expirations and stuff like that. And so we need to update our token store now that we've created our token. We need to store it so that we can compare it later when the refresh is called. So I'm going to do a token store dot add token. Remember, this is like an upsert to your database. And I'm just going to say the user object user.email. And remember, we're passing in user from our from our request to either get a token or get a refresh token. So we're passing that user in. So the user email has already been looked up. So the other thing that it needs is the token to add to the token store. And remember, this is like that data version of the token that we put in the data folder. This guy is the one that stores a token. So the token is an email, an access token, a refresh token, and a refresh expiration date. So we just kind of need to store that stuff. So I'm just going to make a new token here, and we will create one on the fly. So put a semicolon at the end here, and then inside here, we'll put the things that we need for our token. So our access token that we want to store is equal to this dot token, right? Dot token. And then our refresh token is equal to the token response dot refresh token, right? Because we generated one right here, which we haven't actually implemented yet. And then the email that we need, that's easy. That's in user.email. And then the refresh expiration date, I'm just going to do, this is a datetime.now.add-days. And let's just say that this refresh token's good for 10 days or 30 days or however many days you want yours. Some of them, like Facebook and stuff, I don't know what their refresh expiration is, but I know it's long. And then their access tokens are very short. And so this will do everything we need. If it finds a token, it'll update it. If you call refresh, if it's making one for the first time and you call add, it will add to our database or our in-memory database. So I think the only thing really left here, other than solving one bug that I'm going to show you, that's going to creep up that you're going to go, hey, it's not expiring. I have a solution for that for you. So let's generate our refresh token in here. And to do this, we are going to take a byte array, and I'm going to make mine 64 characters long, or 64 bytes long. So I'm just going to make this buffer, and this is just going to hold our random bytes. So this is going to equal a new byte array that holds 64 bytes. And so now we just got to populate those. So I'm going to do that with the random number generator. And the random number generator goes inside of using because it implements the iDisposable. And so anything that uses iDisposable needs to be closed and disposed, and using will do that automatically for us. So we don't need to write extra code if we put it inside using. So var, we'll just call this random number generator, and that's going to equal random number, oops, make that capital R, that's a class. Let's bring that in with an alt enter using system.security.cryptography. And this is a very cryptographically safe random number generator, which means it is probably the best random number generator we can, that we have access to in C#. And so this will create a random number generator object and store it in that variable. And now we need to use that random number generator, and we're going to call get bytes on it, and we're going to pass it our buffer. And get bytes will fill that buffer with random data, random bytes. And so we can just now say return, and we're going to convert to a base 64 string that buffer. So what that does is it goes through each of the bytes in the byte array and it concatenates it to a string. So it turns them into a string representation of the byte array. As you know, strings in memory are stored as a byte array, so it's really easy to do for a computer. And then we will base 64 encode it just in case there's any funky characters in there that kind of makes this a little more transportable and things like that. So this will return a random number. And we don't need to return outside these curlies because it's not scoped that way. It will always hit this return unless something blows up, of course. So now we are golden. We are creating our token. We're generating a random refresh token. We're storing that token and associating it with an email and giving it an expiration date of 10 days. So for the purposes of this video, what I want to do is I want to go back up to our access token here. 30 minutes is going to be hard for me to show you the token expiring, the access token. So for now, I'm going to change this to add seconds, and we're going to make it like 20 seconds. So this is going to give me a token, and then it's going to expire 20 seconds later. So when I try and use the token again, it'll go, no good, 401, you're not authorized. And what we'll do is we'll use our refresh token to call our authentication controller's refresh endpoint, and it will use that refresh token that we send it in the email, and it will end up calling into our this refresh token async, which will validate to make sure our refresh token isn't expired, which that one's 10 days. We should be good. And then it'll get my user. It will create a new token, and the create token will go ahead and create a new access token that expires 20 seconds later, so that we can keep testing our new. And the other thing is, once we use our refresh token, because we're generating a new one every time, we won't be able to reuse our refresh token, because when it goes to validate, it's not going to find it. So that's kind of like extra security right there, that we're kind of getting rid of the old refresh token in our database so that we can't find it anymore, and it's only usable once. And that's going to happen all by itself during the validation phase. Because if you remember here, we go to get our stored token by email and refresh token, and if that guy doesn't exist in the database, you're not going to find it. So, all right, let's fire up Postman. The one I do want, though, is this one, because this one just gets me a token. So I'm just putting. Let's start the project first. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be calling that protected ping endpoint. So if you remember that, this protected ping right here is a protected endpoint. If we hit try it out and we execute without sending a header with our access token, then we get a 401 back. So you can see that it's responding with 401. So we'll call protected ping. I can actually steal that URL right there. And so let's go into Postman here, and we're going to just right off the bat call protected ping, no headers, no nothing, and you'll see we get a 401 here. Let me see if I can make that bigger. Don't know if I can. Zoom in, Control plus equal. Ooh, that's nice. Okay. So we call protected ping and we get a 401 unauthorized as expected. Let's move those guys over. And so the next thing I want to do is I want to get a token. So I'm going to call my API/token, and in the body with raw and JSON selected here in this drop down, I'm passing it a JSON object with email. And this email is in my SQL Server database for this project, because this project is SQL backed. I just am not storing any of the refresh token stuff there. So this is the password for my test user there. So if I get this token, I'm going to have 20 seconds to use that token. So let's get our protected ping ready. And so to do that, I'm going to call the authorization, and then the value is the word bearer, and then right after a space, this is where I'm going to paste my access token. And as long as I have a valid token in there, my protected ping won't come back 401, it'll come back 200. With the word Pong, I believe, or protected Pong or something like that. So I'm going to have to move a little quick because I only have 20 seconds here. So let me hit send. Is there a problem? Might have a bug in our code here. Oh, what does it say? SQL exception. Oh, because I'm not running my SQL Server. Okay. Let's go into, I don't normally run SQL Server just because I don't like the extra resources on here. So I'm going to go down to SQL Server, and I'm going to start my service. Cool. So now let's try that again. There we go, and there's my token. Cool, so now we got 20 seconds. I'm going to copy this in between the quotes. You can see my refresh token is below it. We'll look at that in a minute. I'm just going to paste my bearer token in there and hit send, and I get a 200 OK with a protected Pong. Now, you would think that after 20 seconds, that this would go back to a 401 because this access token that I'm using here expires in 20 seconds. The problem is it doesn't. So if we look, I can keep hitting send here, and I'm sure 20 seconds have already gone by, and it's still telling me it's okay. And this has something to do with the clock skew in how it determines whether or not a token is valid. If we look in our startup.cs, we are validating the lifetime, which will look at the expiration date. And unfortunately, whatever algorithm it's using, without adding this one other thing at the bottom, it just doesn't work. So we have to tell it that there is a clock skew and it's equal to timespan.0. I don't know why we need this. I really don't. I had to look this up, and this fixes the problem. So putting that in, it probably should always be there, but I wanted to show you that even now, if I go back, my token's still coming back 200 OK. And it's way longer than 20 seconds. So I'm just going to stop this and I'm going to start it again so that it compiles with this clock skew code in it. And now it's going to work. So let's go back. Let's go here and hit send, and you can see I'm on a 401 unauthorized already with this old bearer token. So I'm gonna start over here fresh with an API token so we can watch it expire. So here's a brand new token and a brand new refresh token. And I'm going to go in here, paste, hit send, and you see it's okay. If I keep hitting send, as soon as 20 seconds is up, it's going to go from 200 OK down to a 401 unauthorized. So my token is bad. So what I want to do now is I want to call my new refresh token endpoint. So let's go. I'm going to grab that from the Swagger here. Here's my refresh. So it's /API/refresh token. I'm just going to copy that in my new tab here. So it's going to be HTTPS localhost 3000. Actually, I think it's HTTP. Yeah, no, it is S. Oh, we're good. And it's not 3000. Sorry, I'm used to React here. 44328. Right, that's what we have here. 44328. Yeah. And then we're going to put / and we're going to do API, oops, 1/ not 2, API/refresh token. And what we need to do here is we need to send in JSON. We need to send, remember the two things that we need is the email, which is savage.coder@sharklasers.com. And the other piece is the refresh token, which I'll just put quotes in there, and we'll go back to where we got our token. This token is now expired, but the refresh token, remember, is good for 10 days. So I'm going to copy that guy, and we're going to put it inside this refresh token. And what it should do is it should validate both of these, make sure the refresh token is valid date-wise, and that the token that I'm passing in here matches the token that we have stored from when we called this API token. Remember, it stores everything. And then it should return me the same output as this, a token and a refresh token. Both of these will be new. And the new token will be good for another 20 seconds. but this refresh token can only be used once. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to send this 405 method. Oh, it's a post, not a get. My bad.
Whatever.
Okay. So now I'm going to grab this token and we're going to call the same protected ping now with this new token. Now this token I got from a refresh token and it's okay. Protected Pong. So it's working. And I can keep calling this for, well, there's 20 seconds. So it's unauthorized already. It expired. What happens if I come back here and I just call refresh again? Well, I'm sending the refresh token from my original call here, this 6JZ. And when I called this, my new refresh token is a G6X. So this is the one that's actually in our database right now, or in our token store, and not this one. So with these two pieces of information, it's not going to be able to find my token record. So it will not give me a new token. And so rather than this, remember, we just threw an exception and let it blow up, but it's still not working, right? So we get a 500 internal server error. Oops, I should have I should have saved that refresh token, and I didn't. So let's do that test one more time. I'm going to get a fresh token here with our API token call. I'm going to prove that it works by using it in a bearer. So there's our 200. And then let me go grab, while we're waiting, the refresh token. And we're going to call refresh with our refresh token, if it lets me. Cool. So if I run this again now, this protected ping, it's going to fail, right? Because we're expired. And so now I can do a refresh token. I can get my new token, which will work. If I can get it in there quick enough, it'll work. 200, okay. And any second now it's going to expire, because 20 seconds just isn't a long time. There we go, we're unauthorized. So I know if I repost this refresh token, it's not going to work. But if I grab the new refresh token that I got from the last time I called this refresh token endpoint, and I send that one out, then it will give me a new token and a new refresh. The flow that we're looking at here is you get a token and a refresh token, which gets stored. When your token expires, you want to put a hook into your front end. Let's say you have a React front end or an MVC front end. When you make your call to your API and you send that header out, if it comes back 401, before it gets back to any other code, you want to intercept that 401 and you want to grab your refresh token and try to get a fresh token. If you get the fresh token, then retry the original call with the new access token. And then everything is fine until that token expires and throws a 401. You intercept it, refresh your token, make the call again. In the event that you refresh and you don't get a token back because your refresh token expired, then you bounce the user back to the login page, or maybe give them a message, your session has expired, click here to log in again, or maybe we're going to redirect you in 10 seconds or whatever. And that's the flow, and that's how you would add refresh tokens to our JWT security authentication system for the Savage Cell API. So other things you could do there is you could encrypt your refresh token. I don't really see much value in that, but if you're worried about storing your refresh tokens and you don't want anybody to be able to, let's say, break into your database and steal refresh tokens, you can salt and hash those using the exact same mechanism we did for the passwords in this project. So you can look at that. And you, of course, would replace the backend, like I've said 100 times, with a SQL backend or a NoSQL backend, or however you want that to work. Could be Redis cache, could be, whatever you dream up. And then when you're ready to step up to the big leagues, you can go to Auth0 or Okta or Firebase or any of those other alternatives out there. Azure B2C, they all have token OAuth systems that work really good and are very, very secure, and it's something you can rely on. So this is it for now. I think this was really good. We learned how to add refresh tokens, how they round trip, and how they work. And hopefully that was great stuff for you. So please like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments if this was good, if you enjoyed it. Did you learn something? Is there something else you want to learn? Let me know, and we'll create a video just like I did for this one. And so I think in the next video, I came up with something that I want, which is a way to create a Spotify playlist for a concert that I want to go to. And so if there's a new concert out, I can create a Spotify playlist so that I can kind of, learn the songs that I don't know by that artist when I go to the concert, so I don't have to just sit there like this, when that song comes on, because I don't know it. So I think that'll be a really cool project that maybe, you would enjoy and be able to use yourself. So that's it for me. I got nothing else. So I will see you online.